I wanted to offer some Sweet Honey in the Rock music this Sunday. One of the members of Sweet Honey in the Rock, Issei Barnwell, is a member of the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Washington, D.C. And so a lot of their music connects very well with our theology, our way of doing religion. The song that we just heard, Prayer, was written by Issei Barnwell. I want to mention, though, in particular, the one from Bernice Johnson Reagan, I Remember, I Believe, because what she does in that song is she lifts up the source of beliefs. Beliefs are not just something that are out there that we pick one or pick that one or the other. They come up out of our experiences. And so she talks about how she remembers things that she has seen and the people that she loved have experienced, and those are the pieces that she uses to build her beliefs. It's because she's experienced it that she believes things. So when we talk about theology, there's this fascinating conflict that I bump into in myself, because as Unitarian Universalists, it's not about theologies. It's not about beliefs at our center. It's about how we gather as a community and support each other in furthering the human venture. There's a spirituality that's at the center of us rather than a theology, if you want to look at it like that. And so I have this fascination with theology. I just love the stuff. And I want to talk about it, and I want to dig into it, but it's not quite what's at the center for us. So I have this little bit of a conflict, but I think theology is useful because it provides scaffolding, a framework, upon which we can then look at our experiences. We can go through, as Bernice Johnson Reagan mentioned in her song, we can go through experiences of difficulty, and we can look at those experiences and begin to build that framework, or see that framework that maybe we weren't even aware we were setting up. So theology, I think, is not the point for Unitarian Universalists, but it's scaffolding that's there that can be helpful when we're going through experiences, to know what it is that leads us to respond in certain ways to life. So as Doug Mutter said in his reading, the closest thing that we have to what most belief-based communities, which is the standard Western culture, Christian concept of religion, most belief-centered groups gather around a creed, and we don't do creeds. We're a non-creedal group, but the closest thing we have is our 7 principles. But as Doug Mutter correctly points out, they're not beliefs. They're not theology. That's not what they're written as. But wonderfully, there's a lot of theology underneath there that I wanted to spend a few minutes pulling out and looking at together. If you are very, very, very familiar with the 7 principles, wonderful. If not, you can open up your Kindle you can open it up to the responsive reading that we just did, or you can go find hymn number 1 and turn 1 page back. And maybe just put your thumb there, because I'm going to skim through these principles and talk about the theology that's behind them, that's hidden underneath, because there's some fascinating stuff in there. So the way they're written, of course, is that they are aspirational. They're statements of promise, of covenant, of how we're going to act together. They're not statements of this is a fact or this is my belief. So they're written that way. So for example, that first one, affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the belief that's underneath that would be to believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, or to believe that every person has the capacity to be good in a way that can't be granted by the state or removed through some illness. It's there. It may be hidden or masked or wounded, but it's there at its core. Now that's a belief statement, and there's a lot of contrary evidence out there to that statement, which is why Doug Mutter makes the point that they're aspirational. There's evidence contrary, and yet We're going to behave as if this is true. We're going to believe that it's true. Well, when I say we are going to believe, let me rein myself in from getting too excited. We don't believe as a whole unit. I do, you do, about various things. But if you're not going to nod and assent to this exact statement, that doesn't mean you need to get up and leave. All right, like Doug Moody said, he doesn't believe in this, but he's going to aspire for a world in which it becomes true. So this is a theology of human nature. So usually when we talk about theology, the core understanding of what that word is all about is a belief in God. But that's only one small version of the definition of the word theology. Theology is a whole breadth of how we question life and seek understanding and meaning. And there's layers of stuff, human nature and soteriology and eschatology and all kinds of layers of stuff that I'm going to lift up. None of them, strictly speaking, are about divinity or deity or God. And so when I'm talking about theology now, I'm talking about all of this other stuff about how we are human, what's the meaning of existence, what's the nature of the universe, things like that, yeah? One of the things that I want to point out before I get too much further is about the structure of these 7 principles. They're structured in a really interesting way. And it's all that more interesting because they were written by committee. These were voted on by congregational delegates at a General Assembly in the 80s. And so it's a process by which a bunch of people get in a room and they make proposals about the wording for how things should look, and then there's rewriting and there's amendments, and then it's voted on. And the way these were done is because these are the core primary pieces of our bylaws of statement of identity. It was voted on by a delegation at a General Assembly in 1984, and then it went back to congregations, and each individual congregation had the opportunity to review it and look at it and affirm it or question it, and then a second round of voting took place. So this is democratically written principles. But I want to show you a structure in there that belies this sense of committee that's in here, because there's a structure. If you look at the first one, it's about human nature. It's about what it means to be a human being. We're saying that everyone has an inherent worth and dignity at their core. And then the 7th one says that we're interconnected, interdependent, as a web of existence of which we're one part. So here's our statement of what it means to be an individual. Here's our statement of what the universe is. And they become kind of the pillars of what Barbara Wells and Jaco ten Hove describe as an arch. They have this great curriculum out there called Articulating Your Unitarian Universalist Faith. But anyway, there's this arch of these 7 principles, and if you look at the 1st and the 7th, they're the pillars. And the 4th one, which is right in the middle, is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That one is what they describe as a keystone. Now, a keystone architecturally is the piece that pushes against the arch so that there's weight on both edges architecturally of that arch so that it stands. If you take that one stone out, all of the other pieces fall down. Metaphorically, what we're saying is the keystone of this statement is this free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So let me describe that for you briefly. This is our statement of where we get off saying what's what. It's called epistemology. Our statement of how we know what we know. Our proof, our authority by which we say anything. So other options are because it says so in our holy book. Or you could say this is this because tradition has been handed down to us over the ages. And therefore we know it's true. What we're saying is because of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, I have this free and responsible search, and so do you. By that, when I say something is true, it's because I've done this free and responsible search. The source of authority rests in each individual conscience among us. So that's actually fairly radical. So one of the things people say is that these principles don't say anything all that radical. And just about anybody could walk in and nod to them and say, yeah, they're pretty good. But actually, and in gathering as a religious community, if I tell you that this is something that's true, your job is not to go, okay. Your job is to go, maybe. And to think about it. And do your own responsible search to see if that's true. Now that's our statement of an aspiration of how we will be together. Underneath that is this belief statement. I believe that I have the moral and religious authority to make truth claims. And so do you. And that if they conflict or if they contradict, that's room for us to have a conversation. So that's actually a core piece, and it becomes our keystone of theology. Our theological starting point is how we know what we know. If you open up a text written by a theologian, say Paul Tillich, for example, chapter 1 is usually an exploration of the theology of revelation. Truth is known how. Well, this is our statement of how we know what's true. This is our version, not of revelation, because the word revelation doesn't quite fit what we're saying in this. But this is how we know what we know. This is chapter 1 of our theology. Is right in the middle of our principles. Not the first one, but the fourth one, because it's our keystone. So, some of the theology that I've written out here. So we've got our epistemology in the center. We've got our human nature, what it means to be human, being, existence, and the whole of life. The seventh one, our cosmology, our understanding of the universe. The interconnected web, the interdependent web of all existence. You know, there are many religious traditions that outline a different cosmology, a different understanding of creation. Ours is there. It's not the only option. And so there's a theology underneath it that says human beings are not the pinnacle of evolution. Human beings are not the pinnacle of creation. That we are a part of existence. And it also doesn't say that the inherent worth and dignity of every person is the center point of the universe. It's saying that it's interconnected, interdependent. We're all parts of a bigger whole. So those three are pretty singular, right? As you're looking at all seven of them, though, notice the second one says justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And the sixth one says justice, the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Now, it's not just that they both have the word justice in them. If you're looking at the seven principles in that sense of an arc, here's another piece of the structure. As you're moving from the individual in principle 1, you begin to get into how 2 or 3 relate together. And as you're moving from the cosmology of everything into how we are as a world community. So you see there's this scope of circles that happen. And you'll see that in the third one and the sixth one too. The third one says acceptance of one another and encouragement and of spiritual growth in our congregations. That's how we gather as a congregation. And then the sixth one, the fifth one is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. So you see, it's a broadening the circle. What those third and fifth ones say are a theology of ecclesiology, how we gather as a community. So other congregations, other religious communities gather in this different form. This is ours. A democratic process seems like a political statement. That's the words that we use to describe the theology underneath it of how we gather in congregations. But here's the really fascinating part. Buried in these, because so often we're like highlighting the first principle or the seventh one because we love those. This second one and the sixth one, the ones that have the word justice in them. A lot of belief-based religions talk about the end times, talk about heaven or nirvana or enlightenment or the goal of everything. Eschatology. Eschatology is the theological word for this. This is talking about the end, the last things, the ultimate goal, where it all is leading, the grand point of life. We have an eschatology in here. Now, again, you don't have to say, well, all right, that's my eschatology. What it's saying is that this is the statement that we've agreed to aspire to, but it doesn't necessarily mean we all agree on the theology underneath it. But here's what the theology underneath it is. The theology underneath this is an eschatology, a worldview of the end times as a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Our vision of the end of the world is beloved community. It's a world in which we all are one, in which there is justice enough for everyone to be a part of it. So that's a vision of a world to come. So when we say Unitarian Universalism is all about this world and what's going on today, not some other world in the future, that's true because the vision we have of another world in the future is something that we hope to happen tomorrow right here. So this is some of the theology that's hidden underneath these 7 principles. So when people say Unitarian Universalism, when I say Unitarian Universalism is a non-creedal faith, it's not about the beliefs. That's true, but it doesn't mean we're a non-theological faith. It doesn't mean that we have no beliefs. Underneath these 7 principles are options that we can look at of our ecclesiology, our eschatology, our cosmology, our epistemology, and our human nature theologies. There's a lot there. There's a lot more there than I bet any of us thought. And here's one of the things that is important to notice. Why does all of this matter? Especially if it's not what's at the center for us. What's at the center for us is our covenant. It's about how we are together, how we encourage each other, which is a statement here about encouraging each other in spiritual growth, and that we each have that free and responsible search. Our point is how we are together, which is our method, our ecclesiology. It's our how we are gathered. But the message is the theology. The message that we offer the world, a world that is structured by Western civilization to listen for theology, to listen for beliefs. We have a message. I think that we undercut ourselves when we say we don't have a theology, that we don't offer beliefs to the world. We don't have a message that we are offering to the world of how we can be into the future. Would not it be amazing if the whole world not became Unitarian Universalists, but listened to the message underneath and found their theologies that could also affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, that could also affirm and promote each person's free and responsible search for truth and meaning. My goal is not to turn everyone into a Unitarian Universalist. My goal is to open up the freedom of conscience of every person in the world. I think that Western civilization has this assumption that it's all about beliefs. But you know, Eastern religious traditions, indigenous religious traditions, our religious tradition does not say that. So often when you read deeply into Buddhism or Taoism or some of the native traditions, you see what people are saying is that it's a way of life. It's not about believing a certain thing, it's about how you live. So if you bump into someone and they ask you, well, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? You can say that's the wrong question. You can say, well, we do have some beliefs, but maybe you don't want to go right there right away, because that's actually what they're listening for, and they're going to stop listening once they've heard. Maybe you should know what the theology is underneath, but what you want to offer to the world, what the world desperately needs that we are doing here and are offering, is a way of life, a way of being together as people of faith, a way of encouraging one another in hope and compassion and with strength. In a world without end, may it be so.